everyone, and welcome to Tomorrow's Podiatrists with myself and Lauren Connell. And we have a special guest tonight, Professor Caroline McIntosh. Welcome,
Hi.
Caroline.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone tonight. Thanks for joining us. We've had a little bit of a celebration stroke sad night. So do you want to let everyone know, Lauren?
Oh, tonight is my last session. Well, I'm afraid I have to move on.
Yeah. So part of the format with Tomorrow's Podiatrists is that we give people the opportunities to create the next generation, and Lauren came on with the Tomorrow's Podiatrists and teamed up with me it's been a year now. So we've been running these about every 6 to 8 weeks, and it's been brilliant to see Lauren's journey through her PhD as a new young podiatry academic. And yeah, we thought it'd be really good today to kind of recap on everything you've learned, what kind of, and some top tips. And yeah, we've got kind of a nice triangle because Caroline's going to let us have all that wisdom, so we're just going to like absorb that osmotically, and then I'll interject with some
no pressure.
No pressure. And I'm trying to just be like a clinician that also does some research, so we have some challenges there. So hopefully it'll be really enjoyable for everybody. But if you've got any questions or you think you'd like to know more, then please get in touch and put a question in the comments. Join us on Facebook and Twitter. And yeah, we just love to hear from you. I know a few people are thinking about their next step and where they want to do PhDs. We've had a few conversations with people talking about different PhD options, and we've all done slightly different options. Now, Caroline, you know, slightly different PhD, people, the different formats of PhD, so we can maybe touch on that as well if people have got any questions, but hopefully enjoy that today. So do you want to kick us off, Lauren, and talk about kind of your reflections so far?
Yeah, so I think this year has been such an important year, I think, in my career overall. And I'm not just saying that because it's my first year PhD, but I've learned so much personally, professionally, the whole lot. So I thought that was a good idea to start with in terms of looking at like personal development. So like over the past year, it's really opened my eyes to the broad realm of academia, I suppose. Because although I did my research master's, this was really the eye-opener where I had to do my structured modules. I had continuous committee meetings, just continuous journal clubs, loads of different factors to take into account and trying to balance everything together. And it's been just such a journey so far, and it's only the start. So I think that kind of leads into the life of an academic, and this is what we were talking about just before we went live. So like, what's it like to be an academic, to be Dr. Halstead and Prof McIntosh? You know, what's it like day to day?
Yeah, I suppose I entered academia way back in 2003, so it's been quite a long journey at this stage for me. I started, myself and Jill would have had experience of working together in the University of Huddersfield, so that was my first role as an academic there. And then I moved over to Galway in 2008 to set up the first school of podiatry here. So I think probably the role of an academic is how long is a piece of string, essentially. There's so much and so many facets to the role of an academic, and I think that's what I love about the position, is that it's so different, and every day is very, very different as well. So typically, if you were someone starting out in their career in Galway, the National University of Ireland, Galway, we would have structures in that people would do around about 40% of teaching, about 40% of research, and then there's this 20% of contribution. And it's that contribution which again it can be quite burdening, quite time consuming, lots of these different elements. So the teaching usually, is fairly straightforward. You're given your teaching, you know what you're teaching there, but it can be very difficult balancing that teaching and that research. And often the teaching is the day job that has to get done. So the research sometimes ends up taking a bit of a back seat depending on how busy things are. And this year with COVID, it's just been the most incredible year that I've ever experienced in academia, where plans just unravel in front of your eyes because of changes in restrictions or clinics being cancelled. It's just been so challenging. So research most definitely has taken quite a significant backseat this year, for instance. But I suppose in terms of the contribution, you would do a lot at your own university level. So that could be being involved in things like research ethics committees. It could be various committee membership. You'd also work maybe at a national level, promoting the profession of podiatry. So it might be on the professional body. And I do a lot of work with CARU, which is the professional regulator here in Ireland, which is a bit like the HCPC. So we're really only just becoming established. I would have been on fitness to practice committees, I would have been on appeals committees, the education committee, etc. So lots of different committee structures involved with that. And then in terms of research, you'd be invited to be, say, a peer reviewer for different journals. You might be invited to review for grants, for instance, or review textbooks. So just to provide that kind of peer reviewer service to other people. Sometimes you're involved in national working groups. I would have been involved in a national working group on developing wound management guidelines for Ireland, for instance. So sometimes you're involved in kind of informing public policy and health. So many different facets really to the job role, more than perhaps you might think of a academic post.
And how, for you, Lauren, how many of those are kind of things you're juggling at the moment? To give everyone an example, just reflecting on what Caroline, what's your percentage of your different breakdown compared to, like, say, the school that she's working at the moment? So
at the moment, you see, because I'm in my first year, I'm doing all my taught modules. And so over the first year of your PhD, each academic year equates to 90 ECTs. And this year I'm undertaking 60 of them 90 in taught modules. So within those specific modules, I'm doing them in conjunction with the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin. And so they're all surrounded around population health, which is the core of the set of projects that I'm in. So the collaborative doctoral awards, which Caroline is also involved in. And it basically originates around diabetic foot disease as a prevention and also treatments. So there's a total of about 8 projects in that, just as a little bit of background. So my particular project's on health literacy. That's why I tie into population health. And so within them particular modules, I've done a lot of different areas. So I was speaking to Jill earlier and I was saying I had a presentation today on health economics. I had to present a protocol for an economic evaluation, specifically a cost effectiveness analysis on health literacy education on diabetic patients, and essentially is it cost effective, which is something you wouldn't really be taught in your normal PhD. So it's really interesting. So at the moment, most of my life is taken up by these modules. So I'd say maybe 80% of my time this year would be taken on my taught modules. And then I'd say maybe about 15% then research at the moment, but that'll notch right up now once I finish these modules. And then a little bit of teaching. So a little bit of things here and there, and it's kind of settling in at the moment more than anything. But yeah, I can definitely see the same themes emerging with the kind of involvement with the different areas, committees, and all different things like that. So I definitely say it's similar in a way. It's just things are a bit up in the air for me at the moment, but hopefully it should settle down like that.
And mine was quite different again. So mine's an externally funded PhD. So it was Versus Arthritis or Arthritis Research UK. You don't do taught modules. My training folder is right behind me. And you move into straight what's called a level 8. So you register for a PhD and you transfer between 8 and 10 months. So which is where you work up your project area, which is related around a grant. And then you either pass or fail, and you either succeed and progress to a PhD, or you don't at that point, and you don't skip off with anything else like a master's or other modules. So it's a bit more risky, but that's how School of Medicine worked, with an external grant in that mod. And that's what people maybe don't realise. Every university, they do have slightly different setups with, depending on the school and where you're registered. They can be slightly different all the way and different around the country. So mine didn't have any taught elements. It was very much immersed. You had a training, like I say, training folder that you went through, and you picked in-house training to do with. I did everything from speed reading, manager your supervisor, to working in research teams, to academic writing, like how do you write, because that's a big thing in itself. And so you did, and Vitae is a structure that we use to look at what academic elements you can have, and you can map your career onto that. And it's one thing that you do when you're early in your career. And I'll put the link up to Vitae, and you can have a look to see where the leadership and elements are. But yeah, quite different. And that's what I find when I talk to everybody who's gone through some kind of PhD process. It varies quite a lot. Like I say, if you've got more of a lecturing element, you might be more have a substantive post. This is a temporary, PhD studentship is like a studentship. You're either there or you're not. Whereas some people, you're registered as a member of staff. So Lauren, are you registered as a member of staff, or are you classified as a PhD student?
Student.
Yeah. And that can be different again, because some people do it as part of the lecturing job, don't we, Caroline? So
yeah, I mean, yeah, we would have various different models even within our own university. So I suppose Lauren's PhD is quite unique because it was created out of funding from the HRB for the Collaborative Doctoral Award, which we were very successful in getting a 1.5 million grant towards this, which has created the 6 PhD scholars, and then we have a couple of other students funded through a different route, all doing very similar work around the diabetic foot. So I suppose we do taught modules ordinarily in NUI Galway on a structured PhD, but Lauren's doing additional because it's a specific research project, and the idea is that we're training the next cadre of experts in the diabetic foot who will become the research leaders of the future. So it is slightly different, and therefore a lot of the modules that you're taking are providing you with a whole range of transferable skills, which is fantastic. And then there would be PhD by publication. So I did my PhD through the University of Huddersfield, and I did mine by publication. But again, it differs widely. So I did mine where it was a model where you published first. So I prolifically did research and published over a 5-year period, and then you register for your PhD. So you have to go through a kind of a panel process to make sure that your papers are acceptable, and then you produce your manuscript or your thesis based around your papers. So I think I had just 20 odd papers in my PhD by publication. So it was a very different route, but we do PhD by publication here in Galway as well. But that would be where you publish prospectively as you go through the process. So you'd be expected to have in the region of 3 high quality publications, which would be appropriate to your discipline. So very, very different models.
Yeah, and even when I've spoken to people from Australia, they do like a mixed model. They do 6 papers and a shorter thesis, and that's one of the reasons is they don't have an internal panel because of the smaller, like this was Tasmania, for instance. So they do publications, the best way to have collaborations and work internationally, and also have that I suppose that kudos and that authenticity around that research process. So it does. I would have
been an examiner for Monash University in Australia, and just like that, there's no viva process, and essentially because it's all published work. As an examiner, there's not much you can find wrong because it's out there. It's been peer reviewed, and then they just produce a short thesis around the justifying, I suppose, their methodology and whatnot through the process. But speaking to an academic there, she said that is one of the reasons why they're so prolific in terms of publishing, because they have their research groups, and it's all about publishing for the PhD.
Yeah, and I would say, given the size of country, number of researchers, Australia, Tasmania, New Zealand, they do bat well above their weight, don't they, because of this model, and actually the speed they go through and the success. So when you register for PhD, it does go on like a national register, and I was just talking to Dr. Michaeli about it today, actually, about this register, and the universities are, support people to get through these PhDs, and but you've got to produce, mine's a big book, mine's about nearly 70,000 words plus publications at the end. So you're expected to publish as you go along. So there's a lot of emphasis on there to produce that. Even though you don't have to publish to get your PhD, it's expected. Yes. And so it's a lot of pressure, whereas that method actually shows they get more people to finish line, they get more people with more publications, so you get better impact. And actually there's thoughts as whether that's a genuine better model to train researchers in the skill sets and support them in those passages. So because when you finish your PhD, you've finished your training, you're now some independent, fully fledged academic, which is never really the case.
That's not really the case. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it kind of feels like you graduate and you're like, so I'm just at the beginning again. So you're at this beginning phase, but if you've
Yeah.
done that kind of approach, I can imagine that's felt like it's probably helped you in some of those processes. So I can see the pros with that. So it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I can definitely see that, because I mean, as a researcher, you hit on the words. You want to become independent. You want to be able to move forward in as a postdoc with the ideas that you've generated, and really start to push for grants, and of course ongoing publications. But you do see so many early career researchers who get their PhD and they're stalled. They in an academic post, there's lots of other demands competing on their time, and it's a struggle for them to start to gain any kind of momentum in their research.
Yeah, that's me. It is a struggle. I'm living the struggle. But it doesn't probably help because I want to be a clinician as well. So I'm just trying to be greedy. It's hard to balance. So it's hard to balance all the lives. It's all tricky. So yeah, and it's a good reflection to look at different models. So what I would say is anyone who is interested in academic career, there are lots of different models, and choose the model that maybe suits you and your career and what's right for you now. So PhD by publication, prof doc is another, a PhD that's externally funded where you've got a project pretty much ready to go on from the offset, a bit like Lauren's, but you've got that support mechanism there. So there isn't a one size fits all, I would say. I'm sure Caroline agree. And different universities offer different things. Do your research, go speak to people. I always say to people, speak to at least 4 people with a PhD before even considering it, and look at the different models. So I would say, speaking to researchers, I've never found anyone that's ever done exactly the same as someone else, unless you may be on an NIHR pathway, which is very clearly set out, National Institute of Health Research. But most people have done a variety of different approaches. So even like you say, between a project starting and Lauren starting out, yours is still probably tweaked and slightly different from someone even in the same university doing a slightly different program approach. So and that's what's great about it. You can tailor it, you can tweak it, and in that way, I think that's what's exciting about research as well, is that you can make it fulfill your needs.
Yeah, definitely. I think that whole conversation definitely brings up a few points. Like how do we balance our time? How do we prioritize what we should do and what we shouldn't do? Because I know myself, I feel like I have seminars and conferences coming out my ears this point in my calendar. I'm just signing up for everything, all sides, from researcher development center, everything. And it's just so hard to prioritize different seminars in between modules, in between research, in between everything. It's a bit crazy. So how do we manage that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's very challenging. I think you do have to learn to say no, and I think that's in seriousness, that's very hard for a lot of people when they've just come out of their PhD, or when they're during their PhD, particularly if they're being asked to do things by their supervisors or their professors, or because there's a feeling that you have to say yes to everything in order to succeed. But I think it is very important to try and achieve some level of balance. I think it's academia itself, it's all encompassing. You could be spending your entire life just focusing on academia with various opportunities that come along, but it's just not realistic. You'll just lead to burnout. So you have to start to think a bit more strategically about what you take on and what you don't, and what the value is to you. So really, about being an academic, it's about developing your career to be able to progress through the academic cycle. And I would often mentor early career researchers as staff within the School of Health Sciences. And I'd often say to people, you really need to have a clear vision, a 2-year or a 5-year vision of kind of where you want to be. So if you've sat on a committee, say a research ethics committee, for 2 years, what's the purpose of staying on it for another 3? Because you've gained the skills that you needed to gain. So tick that box, put it on your CV, and choose to move on to something different. And try to take on board things that just take you a little bit out of your comfort zone. So you're developing a good wide range of skills in doing that. Again, when you're a journal reviewer, you can get roped in, and once you start reviewing for a journal and you deliver on time, you'll keep getting inundated with requests to review journals. So again, I say to my colleagues, do you want to be the author of the paper, or do you want to be a constant reviewer? Because this is time consuming and you often don't get any thanks for it. So choose carefully which journals you want to review for. And we were talking about this just before we kind of came into the break. Just as an example, if I get asked to review for something like diabetic medicine, I'll turn that round as fast as I possibly can because that's one of the leading journals in my field. But if it's a journal that isn't really of interest to me or of benefit to me, then I'll probably decline that invitation, for instance. So it is about being quite strategic and thinking how you develop your career and your CV. And I think, yeah, learn to say no is definitely the tip of the day.
Yeah, and I really like the fact that you can take stock. So maybe saying yes to something, but taking stock after a period of time, like you said, that 1-2 years. So really think to yourself, what's the added value of that after, say, a year or 2 years? What's to be gained by that, and what does it add to me? And also by moving on, don't forget you're giving some other person a good opportunity as well. So it's actually, you know, some people can get quite attached to certain things, but actually don't forget there's somebody behind you who probably wants that opportunity. So I think research is very much that kind of like stepwise approach. So don't worry, there are other people who can take that forward. So yeah, I really like the fact that it's kind of like if you want to say yes, it's a yes, but with what boundaries around that, you know, what do you want to do a review period with yourself, and helping you kind of make those decisions and formulate the decisions may mean speaking to people who are not directly involved in a project or an aspect, so you feel like you've got a good sounding board. And I would say having a wide range of mentors or people to support some of those decisions is a really good tip, isn't it? And we were just talking a little bit earlier about that. So you were saying about your research group, Lauren.
Yeah, so like it's so important to have that peer support, even if it's just to be able to update each other every week and just talk about how far along you got in, say, your scope and review or some aspect of your project. Like I know myself, as part of the modules that I'm taking, the population health scholar group that I'm a part of, it's multidisciplinary and it's also national, which is very good to have students from UCC, the Royal College of Surgeons, Trinity College Dublin, all different areas, and they're from different disciplines like health economics. There's some pharmacists in the group, there's midwives, there's everything. So it's really good to hear from them, get their perspectives, be able to bounce ideas off them. Because it's really nice to have people outside of, say, your particular research group or department, to get them fresh perspectives from their side of the story. And it's really good to have good mentors that promote healthy behaviors, I suppose, as much as they can. I was saying there earlier, like it's something I've really learned this year is learning how to say no and how to prioritize and strategically pick what I want to do for myself and my career, and where do I see myself in my future. Like, do I want to take on a teaching commitment, for example, over maybe another committee meeting? Something like that, to be able to weigh up the benefits and the advantages of what I want to gain from such experiences. Yeah, it's very hard because I did notice myself kind of sitting at my desk there for a while and almost having blocks on my shoulders of the amount of commitments that I was taking on, because it's so hard to say no when you have so many great opportunities coming in. But that's something definitely learned, to try have that work-life balance, because even now as a PhD student, I see so much of that, of your evening being taken up. For example, outside the working hours, you're not 9 to 5, you haven't these defined working hours like you will have in a factory, for example. And it's so important to be able to discipline yourself and be able to have that downtime and to regenerate for the next day. Like how do both of you achieve that? And
Yeah,
what
I
have you
think
learned?
that's a really good word in terms of discipline. It is very self-driven academia. I mean, our contracts, as you say, we don't have working hours, we don't have start times, we don't have end times. The only thing they ask us to put on our emails is please don't expect, while I may send emails out of normal working hours, please don't feel the need to respond. We're required to add that to the bottom of our emails, because it's just well known that academics just work all hours essentially. I think it's a real struggle, and I do see that real struggle, particularly in COVID times, on women. I do think women bear more pressure in terms of workload balance. I have 4 small children, as I try to juggle an academic career as well. So with that comes all of the challenges of working from home at the moment. I've had little visitors, and I was teaching, and Lauren was on a session, and I was desperately trying to be professional and keep going, and my little girl was running around in the background behind me, and I had to stop the session in the end when she disappeared into the bathroom, and I heard the taps running. But there's lots of different pressures on. I think probably females more than males in terms of trying to balance work life. So I certainly can't say I'm the perfect person in that, because I'd spend a lot of evenings once the kids have gone to bed catching up on things that I hadn't been able to do during the day. But I think it is important to protect time off as well, and that's the one thing that I do try to do in the summertime, and I always try to take a good break with the kids. So 3 to 4 weeks off with the family where I don't touch anything, and I'm very disciplined in that respect. I do walk away, and you do need to have that break. But it is very challenging because the semesters are like roller coasters. You're full in the thick of a semester, and then you get to a holiday, but you get a little bit of a lull, and then it goes straight back up again into the thick of another semester. And yeah, it's very challenging to get a balance.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the thing of, like you say, when I was in full-time academia, I would agree the fact that it doesn't have set hours means you can work flexibly, but it can also mean that you can get into cycles of working quite hard and then not thinking about working smart. So we already mentioned about people working so hard. If that goes on for a long time, sometimes you just got to be mindful of your balance, your mental health, your physical well-being, and keeping yourself healthy. And I would say some of the best academic researchers I see do have a quite disciplined with work-life balance, or try and get that exercise in, all the things that are good for us as human beings, that socialization and trying to work in that way. So yeah, I think those things are really important. I think even more so if you're trying to juggle families or multiple jobs with different approaches, like I've always done like a bit of a dual mix. So bar having my PhD full time, I've always done a little bit of clinic and academia and trying to balance those. But sometimes it's quite nice to partition your brain and go to a clinic, because it gives your brain sometimes time to ruminate. That's one thing sometimes find you can work really hard on something, but you don't get that downtime to kind of think about and reflect and ruminate. I think that's sometimes really important. So going off and doing something different, and then letting that just, as I call shower thoughts, let that kind of come to fruition and then work on that. But yeah, it can be very challenging, and having those other responsibilities, like we talked about, those contributions, those extra bits. So for me, it's Tomorrow's Podiatrist, it's MSK UK, it's being a reviewer for Versus Arthritis, a patient reviewer for Versus Arthritis. It's been on about to go into the International Foot and Ankle Osteoarthritis Consortium. It's various groups and things that you think are really interesting, but the added value of that, and the contribution of that. So like you say, it's keeping that energy going. And I would say you definitely, if there's something you're really keen on, tenacity is the word that I always say to you. You've got a really strong tenacity to be an academic. You want to really see it through, dog with a bone, keep going till it's done, and just be passionate about kind of whatever you've been involved in, and that usually takes you through because you want to see it through. You're really excited by the project. So yeah, don't take on anything you're not excited by, because that would just feel like work. And the whole point of being an academic is it should feel exciting, I think, at least. So yeah, always think about, is this something that I want to do? And like you say, challenge or alter, because I think that's the kind of things that have taken me through and kept my enthusiasm and my motivations when it's been a bit tough. And I was on an international call at like 6:30 this morning, and I've gone to clinic all day. I'm doing this evening. So that's my day in the life of a research academic today. So it can be varied, but I like that. I like the challenges. I like the variation. That's one thing that really attracted me to this kind of strange weird life, Caroline, as we.
Yeah, but like I said, it is the variation. And it's the autonomy, I think, as an academic, you tend to set your own work because, like I say, you choose what research you want to go down, you choose what you take on. And I think for me, I personally get an awful lot out of mentoring the next generation of the future for podiatry. And I'm very passionate about trying to make sure that we do bring more research into the profession, because as a profession we can only grow with evidence base, we're showing our worth through research, and we have to basically enthuse the next generations to be passionate about research and to include research and not see it as something completely separate to clinical practice, because this should be really embedded. Our whole aim is to basically improve clinical and patient outcomes.
Yeah, and I would say one thing of going into more NHS is that's really where I see that as like embedding research, which I find has been, I've done a bit of the upstream, and now I'm like really kind of next career step is definitely on the downstream, but I'm really enjoying kind of, what we're going to use. We're going to use the Wi-Fi criteria, put in a matrix, everyone uses it, you've got a whole team that's providing care for 870,000 people in Leeds, all doing something that's evidence-based, and that's quite exciting. It's like we're embedding research like live, and I think that's for me where I found like my clinical academic niche, because I think I've published things and people still haven't read it, and you're just like, but I put it in a journal. What do you mean? And we've got research that suggests this, and actually sometimes it's understanding the barriers and facilitators of why research isn't taken on, or why it's not enveloped, and actually put it into structures as well. So I think that's where I kind of see my next challenges, because it's the impact for me, the so what, that the other end that I think I'm going to probably, and that carries its own research methodologies and limitations. So it's all a journey all the time, but still having a hand in other things, because you're right, it's just nice to kind of, like you say, get the academic clinical mix. And I think people are seeing that. And I remember Caroline, she was a lecturer when I was at the university, and you do think they felt like they, people who are going through PhDs were like a fairy unicorn that didn't really exist. And now it feels like, I would say, like, since you joined us just as I graduated in 2003, and I would say in my career timeline, it does feel different. And the same in Lauren's, it'll feel different again, because it's that different. So we're quite an even generational here, but I see the difference. I see it becoming much more common to think about as a research career, and also what's that look like? Could it be a lecture academic? Could it be a clinical academic? Could it be a mixture of different bits that you roll in and out of? Could it be industrial academic, because you can work with industry as well? That's, don't forget all the work that goes into creating devices. So I think there's KPIs and knowledge transfers that's really important. So I think there's lots of opportunity, I would say, more now than I've probably seen before. I don't know how you feel, Caroline.
Yeah, and I would totally agree. I mean, I remember enrolling for my master's degree back in 2000, and it was very unusual for people to be really even doing postgrads at that point in time. But I think the opportunities that present now are just huge, and I think podiatry is so diverse in where we can go. As you say, in Galway, we're a massive medtech hub, so we're fortunate that we can work with some fantastic bioengineers as well in terms of our research. And I think there's real potential for podiatrists to be much more involved in devices, in the implementation of the devices with patients. And it's pleasing to see, and I think in Galway we obviously set up the new school in 2008. So it's taken a little bit of time to get our postgrad research up and running. But increasingly we're having students come straight from undergrad, going straight into undertaking either a research master's or starting to contemplate taking PhDs. And that's fantastic to see that people are enthused by research, and they will go on to take up those opportunities.
Yeah, and that's what, when we talked about before, haven't we, briefly, but I did my MSc health research first because I wasn't sure. It was a really nice stepping stone for me to kind of go, let's just see if that's something I really want to do, because I've always wanted to be a clinician. It's important for me to have that patient relationship. And I was like, but I love this as well. What's that taste to feel like? So it's really great that the universities see that and can offer those. Do you want to jump off at that point and then go something else? Or is that something you want to continue with? And I think that's a really nice opportunity. You kind of don't know what you don't know, I would say, at times. And if it's going to suit you. And for some people, they've done research masters, and then we've had some interns. You can join an internship program. and they've done masters, and it's just like, oh, it's not for me, but they've used that and they've got much further on in their career because they've got that real embedded research processes. And we've seen that the internships, and when they've done research masters, they've gone on to like senior clinical posts very quickly because they've been able to use their skills. So I think you're absolutely right, Caroline. It feels like it's embedding there. So
yeah,
you know, like we say, we've got the College of Podiatry Research Committee that we have student members on as well. That again, I've joined that in the last 18 months. So yeah, I feel like there does feel that little bit moving on in the structures that we've got, but it's just directing that really.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I know myself, it's just so, it's so important to have idols per se. Because I'm just thinking back, I remember it was my first year undergrad, and I remember, oh my God, we have a woman professor. Oh my God, I want to be like Caroline. I swear to God, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, we're going to have her for lectures. This is brilliant. And it's just so enlightening to see someone so knowledgeable and so lovely at the same time, so approachable. And the same with you, Jill. I'm getting to you now in a sec. You're next.
I didn't pay her to say all of these things.
She didn't. But no, it's just so incredible to be able to have people to look up to. And I know when I got into, I think it was around my second year, third year of study, I really got into MSK and I was really mad into it. So I joined MSK UK and I was like, oh my God, Jill, she's brilliant. And I just really, really dove in deep, basically, and really went for it. And ever since, I mean, I thought it was incredible when we were paired up together. You know, it's really nice to be able to have people to look up to, especially women in these positions. And it's so influential at the end of the day. And it's just really inspiring. You know, it's really nice to have.
Thank you. That's very nice. And that's, I think it's really important that you can see a model and think, would I like to be involved in that? Or, you know, and that's what we need to, I think as a profession to mature, we need to grow research leaders. And that's what Caroline's talked about with mentorship. And I would say, because I only have a visiting research fellow contract now, I would say I mentor outside of a strict academic. I mentor more the early stage. So I'm like, you're doing a PhD, go and have a chat with Jill type thing. And I think that's great because it's that first, you know, steps. And I'm like, oh, talk to them, because it's quite a strange community that way, isn't it? It is a bit like who you know, and it's like, oh, they're really good. So I would go, you know, if you want to do like I knew you did a PhD publication, I actually mentioned that to the other day to someone. I was like, I know, you know, the Galway, go and talk to that team, or because there's those teams. So it's really nice. And I would say it's more that promotion. And I recently did that lecture at the surgeons conference about research careers to surgeons as well, because even though you've got a specialty doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing or thinking about research, because again, we need to embed that and progress our knowledge and elevate ourselves as a profession to get the evidence of what we do. So yeah, I think there's all different options with how you kind of support the profession and really encourage people to think about taking a step in a slightly different direction maybe we're thinking to start with. So yeah, I think it's been a great opportunity for yourself, Lauren, and also to think about like you say, working with others or doing different things. And, you know, I think these webinars, social media impacts are going to be more important with research taken forward, because we've got to think about getting research into practice much quicker. So embedding research, and technology does offer us that. You know, you may listen to a webinar and take something on much quicker than, oh, I've got to dig out that paper, or I've got to read it again. And there's that, you know, that transition from being and absorbing that research to actually actioning that research is very different. And I think it's nice that, you know, you've kind of grasped onto that. And I think that's what for me, that's what the next generation will probably do very well, because it's a very slow process in a traditional sense, isn't it, Caroline, that you do you know, and it's slow. It's super slow. You know, I've got papers that are taking years to get out for various reasons. And actually there's something about learning and doing part of action research and what could we take forward or not take forward or stop doing, actually, which is sometimes just as important.
I think you also have to develop a fairly thick skin as well in academia. I think you often get a lot of rejections or grants not accepted when you put in a lot of work. So I think you have to try and stay grounded a lot of the time in terms of what you're doing, because you might invest weeks and weeks pulling a grant application together, and then it doesn't even get past the first stage, and it can be really disappointing in that sense. But you have to be able to pick yourself up and go, okay, not that one, we'll try that somewhere else, or to move on. But like I say, it can take an awful long time with publications, and we would have submitted things last October. We still haven't heard anything from the journals because everything's even slower with COVID and the lack of reviewers and things. Very time consuming. But I think nowadays, you just mentioned social media. I think one thing we're not always good at as researchers is shouting about our own achievements. So the likes of putting your own paper out there on Twitter, and using social media with some level of savvy. We've just got a marketing officer in the college, and we're all sitting there going, yeah, we never thought of doing that or doing that. And I mean, she's just amazing in terms of knowing what to do to get information out there. So I think we can learn a lot on how we can increase things like citations and generally, the podiatry research profile by the use of effective social media.
Yeah, and I went on a Twitter course for my Twitter account is Dr. Halstead is a professional one, and yeah, I went on a course that my husband recommended since IT, and yeah, there's a way, there's definitely formulas about what you elevate, and I have a very specific MO with mine, what I do, what I promote, and it's keeping that now, and people want to know how that on the feed or not. So you're right, I think it's a really good resource to kind of promote. So yeah, there's definitely ways of working that quite savvy, that quite interesting, and and even patients following you, things that I suppose we're more engaged. There's not as much that divide between academia and non-academic. It becomes you just absorb the information. Actually, direct to consumer will be more often because Google Scholar is not that hard to use, whereas mesh terms and trying to find your way around an academic library. We're just next level. We still have cards when I was at Huddersfield.
I can remember sitting on the library floor when I trained in Southampton in 1995, and we were sitting on cross-legged on the library floor, having to go through like wades of reference sources, trying to find just one paper to help you with your assignment. And everything in this digital era is just click a button and there it is.
So you had like annual indexes, and you'd look on an annual index for a word in like orthoses, and it'd say how many publications that year might have had the word orthosis in, and then give you 20 journals to go and look at in shelves all over the library, and you've just done like one letter for like a day. You're like, and then you have to find a photocopy, and then realise you haven't got enough money to photocopy them.
And now a student would email me going, I can't find this paper, it's disgraceful. It's like, the digital era.
I'll tell you what, should we have a little bit of break there, and let's do feet in 3 minutes. So obviously as part of tomorrow's podiatry, we asked people to put together I suppose a theme on feet in 3 minutes, and so it'd be good for you to get involved in that if you've not done already. You can do little films. They're always looking for like innovative ways of doing that. So I don't know if we've got any examples to bring up, or but it'd be really good for you to get involved in that and visit tomorrow's podiatrist. There's a prize I remember from last time, if that's right, Lauren, I think.
Yeah, you can win up to £1,000.
So it helps us explaining feet to the general public, and it has to be like, so think about your kid or your granny or your neighbour who's not in health at all, like understanding it, and there will be premiering all those different results at the end of the month. So if you think you've got really innovative ideas, or you feel like you're really artsy, get some Lego. Apparently Lego is a thing. And go for your life. But it'd be really good for people to get involved, and it's all about raising the profile, and things like that are just as important as research, because actually it's thinking about like foot health, which is really important for us to all to promote, because keeping independent, functional and active is just a really important part of living well. So actually us promoting that and being the experts in this field is such an important part of what we do, not just like the nitty-gritties of whether it works or not. So and like obviously like as you're involved with public health, it's those bigger picture messages, isn't it, at times?
Yeah, definitely. And for it to be health literate and just just accessible to the public, essentially. So just as a quick summary, we want you to explain an aspect of podiatry, a part of anatomy, a pathology, intervention, whatever you like, within 3 minutes, and tell it any way you like, as long as it's original. So,
yeah, brilliant. Good luck with that. Yeah. Obviously, we'll let you know what's coming up as well, because obviously there's themes with tomorrow's podiatrist. So we'll obviously keep you abreast of that. And tonight we'll probably just, if you've not seen it before, we'll let you look at. We obviously do themes as well, like trying to explain your theme of your research in 3 minutes, like a research paper. So this came out from a 3-minute thesis. So if you've done like a thesis, there's a competition nationally saying, can you explain that in 3 minutes? Because you should be able to devolve a big story into a really small message, so it's easily absorbed. And so it's a good skill as a researcher. I was under Professor Redmond, and he was like, explain your thesis in 15 words or less, which is just torturous because that still counts. And I used to a lot when I was a student. I was very young and green. So these 3-minute ones are really good. So we've got Trevor Pryor explaining heel pain in 3 minutes. So we'll let that come up now. So hopefully enjoy that and join us back. And we're willing to take your final questions before we close tonight. And I hope it's been good so far.
There we go. Okay, so this best practice guide was built on a meta-analysis of the evidence, interviews with clinicians, and a patient questionnaire. I should say it was a multidisciplinary international paper of which I was one small collaborator. The papers were assessed for quality with a sample size of 38 considered adequate. Efficacy was judged as primary if the intervention was compared to an appropriate control, or secondary when compared to a treatment that has proven efficacy. From an initial identification of 11,769 papers, 51 were deemed suitable for analysis. Meta-analysis was undertaken with standard Forrest plots produced, and these two demonstrate the efficacy of custom orthoses and shockwave therapy. Efficacy was deemed positive if there was sufficient evidence, neutral with no evidence. The strength was high if there were multiple high-quality studies, moderate if one high-quality study, and limited if one high-quality study with insufficient sample size. The evidence was also considered in the short, medium and long term and colour-coded according to the level of evidence. This example demonstrates the benefit of custom orthoses in the short to medium term. Interviews were then undertaken with 13 experts from 4 continents and 5 disciplines to develop a number of themes. These were then combined with the evidence to form the basis of the guideline. The evidence and clinical reasoning were then presented to patients who undertook an online survey to explore their thoughts and experience to ensure these were included in the guideline. This allowed the development of the best practice guide based on a synthesis of the information and includes a guide to the duration and timing of interventions. As you will see, there is a core approach throughout the course of treatment with shock and custom orthoses introduced if insufficient progression. Injection therapy remains an option, but is considered experimental due to the lack of evidence. The core approach centres around fascial stretching and taping with a strong emphasis on education. This needs to be adapted to the individual patient and covers load management, pain, in particular an understanding and monitoring of pain levels, related medical conditions including BMI and footwear. The core approach with the introduction of shockwave and custom orthoses are the key interventions, although it is acknowledged that the injection therapy and surgery have a role. It's important to note that the interventions can be introduced earlier depending on the previous experience and level of pain. Further research is required to explore the role of the shelf orthoses, injection therapy and surgery, but overriding all of this is the importance placed on good patient education. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you found that helpful. That was a really interesting approach with the 3 minutes. So they'd like combined a systematic review approach with like almost like a consensus model. And I suppose what was really interesting from that perspective is they've elevated electroshock therapy, where I know there's going to be another Cochrane review about to come out around that, because there's been some more studies. So it's interesting when they've done an expert evaluation, they've probably pushed that a little bit higher, probably because they're more recent studies, so they're likely to be probably higher quality. So yeah, it's a good take to kind of think about that crossover between reviewing articles, but then looking at that expert review process, and and trying to get that consensus across other countries, which can be interesting because there's different health models as well that are probably different drivers, and also what's going to be right for that patient and what's safe. So that's what's usually reviewed as well. So yeah, I found that quite interesting actually. It was good pictures. I love a good picture set with explaining research. Good infographic.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if we've had any questions or if anyone's come forward, but do you have any closing thoughts or recommendations? We're going to obviously continue this. We tend to run this through the academic year, and so the next one we'll start is in September, and it'll be the new Lauren, whoever the new Lauren will be, because you'll be like getting through your career, so we need more young blood.
I know. I'm getting old.
Who are you going to choose for me? You need to choose somebody good.
I will.
So do you have any kind of thoughts, or do you think about kind of the next so someone coming after you, what do you think you'd do different, or do you think would be good advice?
I think it'd be very good to set aside some time every week to just purely focus on papers of interest and not just papers you're reading because you're doing a literature review. That type of reading, because I find I don't get as much time as I used to do that, but hopefully I will soon. So definitely, and the possibility of a journal club, like you said previously, to really discuss research and really critique it and kind of discuss methodologies and debate around the methods used and things like that. Could definitely be a great idea. I mean, since we were just starting the whole segment and trying to get up and running, a little bit more structure could be cool. Just as something different, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, it'd be good. It depends who the next person comes.
Yeah,
it'd be good. Do you have any thoughts over kind of what you think researchers need now, Caroline? Because you're like looking at the next generation. Do you think it's changed of what people need now than they did before, or that there's something that we can be doing differently to encourage people? Do you think?
I definitely think the involvement of public and patients in research is a real positive move forward in terms of kind of the research approaches that we're doing. In fact, most of the funders of large grants expect you to have a PPI approach embedded in across the research, and really using patients and the public to, I suppose, give their ideas, opinions, and guide where we go in terms of research. It's quite an exciting way of approaching research, because it's a bit like a mystery tour. And I'm working with somebody at the moment, and we're just starting off on the PPI journey. And it's really what those patients have fed back and expressed their opinion on. It's informed our next round of methods for her PhD. And we hadn't planned on going down that route, but because of the stakeholder involvement, we've totally shifted the way that we're going to roll out the research. So I think PPI is a really positive move forward that certainly wasn't around when I was an early career researcher and involved in research. And I think that also gives the researcher a really good insight into the clinical needs of what they're actually researching. So I think that combination is really good.
Yep, I would agree. As part of working with the Leeds Biomedical Research Unit with Anne-Marie Keenan, they even have a PPA lead person that coordinates this in a big involvement group. And that was always great that you could set a call out and say, I want to talk about this. Does anyone have it, would like to come along? And it's that like 200 people. The foot stuff was always so popular. I think I had 13, which actually too many to kind of get an opinions around the room. So it was really nice that patients want to be involved with it from different backgrounds, and different ideas, which I think was great. So you could send around a grant idea and they could say, yeah, I want to come and chat to you about that. Or they just say, would you be happy? We're thinking about producing a leaflet. This is our first draft. Did you have any thoughts or feedback? So that was like a really useful group that I thought was fantastic. And when I've seen it work really well in hospitals, Salford Royal have the citizen patient. So you can join as part of your citizenship. And so you just join online. And again, it's like part of like a male group. So, you know, but it's a way of being involved actually to participate in research and also produce research, which I thought was really nice, so that you become part of that local community citizenship. And I just thought the whole process was just a really authentic approach. So you think, I want to be in research, I've got a disease, I wonder if anyone's going to ask me about that. Well, I don't know if the consultant's got time, I'll just register my interest. And we got a few patients for research studies when I worked with Paul Chadwick and Samantha Haycox at Salford Royal through that scheme, because they just said, oh yeah, that's something I'd like, I've got diabetes, I'd like to be in a diabetes trial. So again, it's really nice that people can come forward and volunteer themselves. And so yeah, I think, and we did a big session on that, didn't we, because that's something you're really passionate about, the PPI, Lauren. Like I say, my only concern is you do get patterns of similar types of people that come forward who feel quite either educated or feel they've got a voice, and sometimes it's the voiceless that I'm just as, or people maybe feel not as articulate in the process, and I think that takes a little bit more work. And I think since I'm quite involved in health inequalities, and I've done a recent allyship course associated with disparities in heritage, skin colour in the last year, I think that's opened my eyes a lot more to why there's more there's more people involved in research with certain privileged backgrounds. I think sometimes we need to think about what does different communities need from different health research and our healthcare in general. So I think there's a bit more work to be done in that field. But again, I think there's a lot more national engagements that you can again run through organisations. Say, is this something your organisation can put into your members, and does that something they want to come with? So yeah, I think. But it's definitely come, and definitely in the last, I would say, 5-6 years, Caroline, I've definitely seen this big shift. And in lots of grants now, it's almost you have to have it in.
You have to,
yeah. I would say there's very few now that do. If you tried to move with a large grant without a PPI, patient involvement, then they would be questioned: is this authentic? And even things down to your idea might be, I think it'd be really good if patients wore this, and you go to the PPI group, like, we're never going to do that. We're not going to fill out that diary every day. What are you talking about? So actually, when you think, your trial might fail because you've given it in a certain way that it's just not acceptable. And you could do a feasibility trial to look at acceptance, or you could ask 12 people from a PPI group and they can give you an array of ideas to test. So it does actually, from my experience, really, really help. We weren't sure, for instance, if people were happy watchful waiting, like, are you happy to just wait and see what happens? And we were like, they'll never go for that. The ethics committees can be all you without treatment. And actually, if you monitor me and you'll rescue me at any time, I think I'm pretty happy with that, because that's basically what the GP does all the time, because I work in arthritis. I was like, oh, yeah, good point. Here's a bit of tablet. If it doesn't work, go away. So actually, we sometimes think we have to rescue and do lots of things in a trial. And actually, it could just be, what does that look like compared to what you're normally getting, compared to something a bit more interesting? So I would say, personally, my perspective, it's really exciting time.
We had something similar with venous leg ulcer patients, and I think trying to go through an ethics trial by saying that you're going to take a tissue biopsy from a painful venous leg ulcer, the ethics behind that, just for the sake of taking a biopsy, but actually the panel was saying, God, yeah, take it if it's going to help me. It's very different trying to get someone through ethics, but the patients actually, if they think that this might help me at the end of the day and it might help something to heal, then do it.
and particularly like ulcers, where people can have them for years and they're told just use the bandaging. I feel like they do feel like they've got limited options, whereas this can add added value. It's that, and that's what maybe it's that. I'm happy to take that risk for added value, because I don't see where added value is coming from. There's no fancy technology that's suddenly going to image it in a certain way. The biofilm data probably isn't there enough yet with wounds. So like you say, it's interesting what you would think and what it's kind of offset with. And we did a similar study in rheumatology. I think it was 6 vials of blood, which would almost send someone to anemia. But they were like, but if it's really important that you take that now before the drug is commenced, then we can look at whether that drug's actually got that responsiveness, and they can use this. It's a technique called methylation array, just to see whether there's a certain responsiveness to that drug on changing the disease pattern. So they were like, but if that gives you more of a stratified approach, that drug that works really well in that type of disease, I know that that person's going to have a much more unique approach to healthcare as opposed to just, oh, let's try this one, then the next one, then the next one. So again, we present it in a way people will take risks and benefits in research, because that's what they're there for. I suppose if they just want an average approach, they'd just carry on as is, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting. So we've done our hour, everyone. So I just want to personally say thank you to Lauren, who I think is absolutely wonderful. I think she'll have an amazing career. Thank you, Caroline, for supporting and picking her, obviously. Well done, everybody.
No, she was a pleasure to mentor.
Yeah, and the health literacy is such it's growing. You're definitely at that cusp of a really important health shift and change. And I talk about health literacy all the time, so spending lots of time with you. And I'm like, well, I know, Lauren, health literacy is really important.
Yeah.
Even in like day-to-day clinical practice, the way we use like simple wording in letters, and I'm constantly, it's on my mind now. So again, you're always learning all the time in academia, so don't think about the influence that you have as well, even at thinking about the beginning of your career. So it should be really exciting, everything, all the developments. And I know you'll still be working with tomorrow, but I shall see you around. But it'd be really good to see how your career develops and maybe come back on and tell us all about it. It'd be really good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've embarrassed you enough now.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Spread it around. Just a little bit. No, that's good. So well done. And we'll see you after the summer break, everyone. Hopefully we'll be doing another quiz. We did a quiz to start off the academic last year, which was really good, actually. So that was it'd be really nice to do that again. And we'll see you in the next academic section. But yeah, have a good summer, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.